Would you say that the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the EU today is at the strongest it's ever been?
Well, it's difficult to tell, but clearly it's one of its best in many fields, and both between member states of the Union and the Kingdom, but also collectively. And again, I don't say that in a naive way or just for kind of diplomatic talk. When you look at what's happening, that's where we are. I mean, I mentioned earlier economic figures, but when you look also at what's happening, for instance, in the political dialogue, including following the summit I mentioned earlier between the GCC and the EU, or now the way we coordinate on top regional topics, even if we can be frustrated at times, etc. It's not because of the bilateral relation. Bilateral relation is excellent. It's the reality on the ground, which needs probably even more action, more coordination, but we see eye to eye on many topics.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the show. I was honored when your assistant reached out, and then I did a bit of Googling on you, and I realized that, for ambassadors who come to Saudi Arabia, typically they represent one country. You, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong, represent 27 countries as the ambassador of the European Union to Saudi Arabia. Lots to get into. Thank you so much for your time today.
The pleasure is mine. Thanks for the invitation. Always very exciting to meet journalists in this new Saudi Arabia. Yes, as you said, I'm the European Union ambassador, and sometimes people do not even know there are European Union embassies. So what do we do? Yes, we do represent the 27 member states, but in a special way. We represent the European Union institutions, the famous Commission, Parliament, and Council, which are based in Brussels, and especially the External Action Service. But so if any high-ranking official from the EU comes, we're in charge of the visit, as a national embassy would be about national visitors. But we also do, and that's why we represent the 27, do the kind of coordination work that has to happen in Brussels and here. So regularly I chair meetings with my EU colleagues from member states. And when we have to carry out démarches at the MOFA, for instance, Foreign Affairs, if we do it collectively, I chair the delegation. But of course, this leaves an open space and all their competencies to my national colleagues. I was myself an ambassador of France twice, so I know that you have to take into account a subtle balance between what is EU, strictly speaking, and what is national. But I must say that being here and doing it now is very exciting. I was aware of what this incredible country is doing now, and I wanted to be here and see it, and now seeing it from this point of view of the European Union is very exciting.
We're moving beyond, using our past to propel, sharing our culture, nature, heritage, hospitality, progress with the rest of the world. Welcome to our future. Welcome to Saudia, built on big ideas and a passion for change, inspired by heritage and progress, made by dreams and determination. We exemplify it all. Come find your place in it, with us. Our future starts now. Saudia. This is how we fly.
You said one of your first time, if not your first time in Saudi Arabia, was 12 years ago, 12, 13 years ago. You had a chance to see the country back then, and you have a chance to see it today as Vision 2030 is in its 7th year of existence. Yeah, 2018. What immediate takeaways do you take from the Saudi Arabia you saw in 2012 as opposed to the Saudi Arabia you see today?
Well, the speed of change is amazing. The depth of change is amazing. And the fact that it's actually happening constantly is amazing. And sometimes, you think of countries that change. But this one used the word, people use here the word transformation, which in a way implies a deeper change than just reforms. And I think it's right. What's happening here is incredible. I think this country, this kingdom, through Vision 2030 and under the guidance of His Majesty the King and the Crown Prince, clearly has decided to have a very strong strategy, all-encompassing and with a vision which I think corresponds to the challenges of the new era. And so what strikes me as well is that it's not just about the economy, because this message about economic changes now has been understood worldwide. But I think the strategy goes much deeper. It's about a whole national project which builds, in a way, a new nation state in the way the Europeans did a few centuries ago, but except that it's happening over a few years only. And it comes with social changes as well, in the cultural field, in the way people behave. And I think that's incredible. I think that currently I cannot think of a country where so many things are happening so fast in so little time. So being posted here is very exciting, because for the Europeans, this region and this country in particular is our close neighborhood. So what's happening here has direct consequences, positive ones. And given the partnership we already have, it's very important to be here, to understand it, to make it understood in Europe, and of course, be part of it as partners are part of deep changes, especially at a time when the world is changing very fast. So if you want to be a major player over the coming years, you have to have reliable partners. And that's the key challenge now.
We were just talking before we started shooting how the general consensus back home for you in France is that, Saudi Arabia is something different to what it's like in reality. I can speak on behalf of England because I lived there and I go there a lot, many times a year. And I saw actually a clip on Instagram recently after Saudi Arabia was awarded the World Cup. Somebody was going on the street with a microphone and they were saying, would you go to Saudi Arabia for the World Cup 2034? 3 out of 4 people were like, no way, no, I'm not going, no way, no. Why is there a discrepancy with Saudi having this reputation at home, but then when they come here, they scratch their head and they're like, oh, ooh la la, this is not what, we were made to believe. It's completely different to what we have read about. Why do you think there is that discrepancy?
Well, I think basically that's very human. Our minds have to take into account a new reality, and it takes time. And when things are happening so fast, it's even the discrepancy between perception and reality is even bigger. And of course, there's the distance. Even if in a time of globalization, connection is very fast or even immediate, still people have to understand it, have to see it. And I think in a way, Saudi Arabia, being a large country, has always had an image. You have countries in the world which people haven't heard of nearly. Saudi Arabia has always been in the picture, at least in Europe. And so this is why now that reality is changing and there's this new picture, and not just picture, reality, a new reality, I think it's very important that people can perceive it. But to complement what you just said, I think it is changing right now. I could even see it. It's especially among the youth in Europe. When I said I was appointed to Saudi Arabia before coming, my children who are young grown-ups now were very excited in a way that probably would not have been the case 20 years ago. And even now, when you talk to people, and you can see that students want to come here. Young people who recently graduated are interested in getting positions in Saudi Arabia. I could see it myself, and I heard it even from Saudi business people
Yeah.
who commute between Europe and here and see the difference. Recently, I had a conversation with one of the gentlemen, and he said, look, a few years ago, if I even said I was a Saudi, there was no particular interest. Now I say I'm Saudi, and so people come and ask if they can come and work with me on something. And I think it's very typical. So it is being taken into account. And clearly, I think we still have to explain and to support and facilitate. It's an ongoing work. And that's also why it's so exciting, because it's happening right now. So being here is a way to see what's happening. And again, I think part of the job of diplomats here is precisely to understand it, of course, and to explain it as well. And then, of course, very concretely contribute to building this partnership we're talking about in many fields. So, well, here we are. That's the time. It will last. The time it will last, probably quite a few years, because the ambition of the project makes it a long-term project. But it's very important to be aware of it and facilitate it.
What does a day look like for you, for those who don't know what goes into the life of an ambassador? Are you working 7 days a week? Are you working 5 days a week? What time are you up? What time are you in bed?
That's a good question, because quite often people don't really know, and they think of ambassadors as nice people, but who just attend receptions in the evening and say nice things to nice people and go home. And no, well, you were closer to it when you said working 7 days a week, because that's the point. When you're an ambassador 24/7, basically. Of course, alhamdulillah, not just not in a very difficult way all the time, but you have to work a lot for many reasons. One is that basically you represent your country, or in my case, the European Union, wherever you go, in a way. So there's a mix between private and public, which is a bit permanent. But also you have to understand where you are. You have to, as I said earlier, to be able to explain and to facilitate things, and sometimes, of course, to decide yourself. So you must be aware of what's going on around you, because even being here today, for instance, is for me a way to experiment this new Saudi Arabia. This incredible location, for instance, is so typical of the new era. And so talking to you is part of the job in a way, and a pleasant part, but also even just to understand how things like this kind of interviews, this kind of program can exist. And so to be short, working as an ambassador means long days. You start early and you end late. Being flexible, because there's a lot of changes in all fields, and to be able to like diversity of the people you meet and of the files you have to deal with, because embassies are dealing with political issues, of course, but they also promote economic relations and take into account social changes, helping people-to-people approaches, as we say, in projects, which in fact can be on education, on arts, on even on sports. So you see, it's you need a kind of holistic approach. And yes, you send reports to your capital, you get your instructions, etc. So you see, it's both ways among the people you meet. And on the one hand, you're dealing with your Saudi interlocutors, but you're also in contact with your capital. So it is this permanent mix that makes the specificity of the job. Plus, of course, you go from the strategic level, understanding geopolitics of the region, to the very basic things about the menu of the dinner you will host in the evening and the seating of your guests. It's an interesting mix.
Has the last couple of years been more challenging than the last 5 or 7 years, would you say?
I'm not sure. It's there has been an acceleration, for sure. So there's more speed means even more work and more challenges, but also in a good way. And it's better than the opposite. And we were talking before the program of the COVID years, so where everything was frozen. Although nothing could be completely frozen, but clearly the rhythm was different. Now things have resumed, taking into account, by the way, this new reality. So I think the rhythm is different. I think there's more things even to do now. And clearly the world is evolving into various directions, and probably in a more complex way, and maybe with more tensions and more challenges. And Of course, diplomats have to be aware of that because we are particularly in charge of the international relations. And so in that sense, the very last years maybe are more complex, but the trends are the same. Maybe what will make a difference now is to be able to understand, given the new context with growing tensions, even war in Europe, but also the current crisis in the region, what happened in Gaza, what happened in Lebanon, in Syria, and in the Red Sea, for instance. I don't want to be too specific on international relations, but still I think it's the background as well. So this is a bit different from what it was a few years ago, where people in a way were quite optimistic in an apparently stable region and probably in a more stable world as well. So in that sense, it's more complicated, yes, more complex at least.
Do you enjoy the job? What are your more favorite or more preferred parts of the job?
Well, I really love this job. I wanted to be a diplomat and an ambassador one day. And no, I really love it. And for a series of reasons, but I think the core thing is this mix I mentioned. You have to understand people. And I think it's very important, the kind of intercultural dialogue. Sometimes it's just used as a stock phrase, but it's not. Mm. The core of a diplomatic mission is to be able to understand messages and pass messages with people who are not you. Yeah. So you must be able to understand how they work, how they think. And sometimes it's rather easy. Sometimes you're talking to people whose cultures and references are totally different. Mm. And mistakes might be easy, leading to dangerous misunderstandings. So being able to be always trying to understand that, I think, is key. So that's something I really like. And so that's why I enjoy living in different countries over the years. And I think that's also, this, as I said, this mix of some things that are very, in a way, conceptual, strategic, intellectual, where you need to have a fine analysis of something, and sometimes much more concrete groundwork, visiting schools, meeting people at receptions. That's nice as well. Visiting companies, supporting companies at times, being able to enjoy this kind of public events. I think that's something which is really, really nice.
You're seeing companies from Europe coming to Saudi Arabia and setting up shop at a far higher rate than ever before. Is that something that you are a part of in bridging that gap and introducing these European big companies to Saudi Arabia?
No, I think it's key. We were saying a few minutes ago that economic reforms are at the core of the changes here. And so I think it's true. But I think that then it's important that the economic partnership stay as dynamic as it was. Mm. As maybe the European Union collectively is a key partner for the country in terms of trade or investment. In trade, it's the European Union, roughly speaking, is the second partner of Saudi Arabia, and in foreign direct investment, as we say a bit technically, mm-hmm. The European Union ranks first, which I think is quite a lot. And so I think it's if you talk in terms of stocks, it's about in 2022, which is the last figure we had, it was about 30 billion euros. And in trade, it's in 2023, it was 70 billion euros in goods and 17 billion in services, something like that. So big figures. But then what counts is not these figures, it's also the reality of it. Partnerships between companies and access to market, of course, on both sides. And I think that's a way also to strengthen the relations between the two entities. Then, as we know, for us, it's also the market law, so we don't step in that regard. But again, facilitating contacts is key. And that's why we established last year in May an economic chamber of commerce. A European Chamber of Commerce in KSA, and it's the first in the region. There are not so many all around the world, and it's a European approach, again, to facilitate business-to-business relations. So you see, again, that was a good example. You have the broad vision. This country is changing. We all need, in a world of globalized exchanges, stronger relations. So then we are aware of it, we know the companies, and we promote it by creating a chamber of commerce. In the same way, for instance, as more broadly with the region, we promote these relations through what we did with the EU GCC summit in October last year. A wider picture, but a big chapter is about the economy, for instance. So that's where we stand. And yes, it will evolve. And yes, it will depend on decisions by the companies themselves. But to be here and be able to help, I think, is one of the main tasks for us.
That's exciting that there's an EU Chamber of Commerce in Saudi Arabia. I didn't know that. You said there aren't many around the world. How many are there in the world, roughly?
A little more than 50.
50.
Yeah, 50. It was about, when we established ours, I think it was 51 to be precise. There must be maybe now one or two more, I don't know, but that's the figure. And again, it comes according to local initiatives, and we worked on it, of course, but also with a broader picture. Countries where it particularly counts, where it matters. And I think it's significant that now this Gulf region is part of it, and especially, of course, Saudi Arabia, which is the core element. So it's just a baby European Chamber of Commerce, but going well, and of course, we wish them well.
When it comes to tourism, I won't talk about what's to come with the Expo and World Cup. I'll talk about what's happening right now. 10 years ago, when you wanted to come to Saudi Arabia, you had to apply for a work visa, and it was a lot more difficult. Tourism didn't exist. You could not come to Saudi Arabia as a tourist up until very recently. Today, the e-visa system is open to about 100 countries. The Italian and Spanish Super Cup was held earlier this month in Saudi Arabia. Are you noticing a bigger footfall with the European tourists coming into Saudi Arabia as of late?
I don't have the overall figures right now, but in terms of interest and what people say and ask, yes, obviously. And in a way, people being what they are or who they are, the fact that it was closed to tourism before makes it even more exciting now.
It's part of our marketing.
So, and I must say that the offer is nice. When you showcase Al Ula, for instance, who could resist? There was a magnificent exhibition a few years ago in Paris at the Institut du Monde Arabe about Al Ula. It was very successful. And, I could visit it a couple of times already, 3 times even. And I must say it's amazing. But it's not the only thing, it's good to show it, but the country has much more to offer. So I think it's just the beginning. And yes, there's, you have potential customers and visitors in big numbers. And it's growing maybe not at I don't know. It seems the figures are big. I see it in the press. Europeans are involved, but I think there's still a lot of room for maneuver for our Saudi friends to promote Saudi Arabia. I mentioned earlier the interest of the youth. Well, I think it's key because they're the new generation. They're the ones who will now, for years, take it into account, but they're not the only ones. I have personal friends who at once told me, oh, you're going to Saudi Arabia, we have to visit. And again, that's something you didn't hear so often a few years ago. And now I can tell you it's a reality. And it's not just in France, not just in Germany, not just in Italy. Everybody now is interested in it. And again, with question marks, but I think it's the trend is a very positive one.
Truly.
جديد. اكسر الروتين مع أطباقنا الجديدة من بيتزا هات جدة. بيتزا هات جدة، ذوق طعم الثقة معنا.
I'm noticing a lot of people coming to watch Al Nassr, just to come watch Cristiano Ronaldo. Like that's their first entry point into Saudi Arabia. And they're like, wow, the food is so tasty. Wow, you can walk in the street at 2 a.m. and feel safe.
Absolutely.
Wow, it's cold in Riyadh. And I think that people who think that Cristiano Ronaldo came just to play football, he came for many other reasons and different touch points. Almost like now he's an attraction for people to come and visit.
Yeah, and that's interesting because that's a very interesting point. These football players coming here, of course, there's this strictly sports part because now you have more and more people following the championship here. But then, of course, there's the kind of more people think about them. But slowly, by showing the locations, showing that there are matches here, etc., you change the picture of the country as well. And it's very, very, very interesting. But I think it extends to much more sports than just football. Football, of course, is the key aspect in sports. But it's not just that. When you talk about boxing, rallying, tennis.
Yeah.
And on that, by the way, it makes me think of the role of women. I have met personally already female champions here. And it's very exciting for the country, and it's a huge thing for foreigners. And when I went back to Europe a few weeks ago, etc., I showed or I talked about these female champions in, again, rallying, boxing, etc. And it does make a difference as well. And so I think it's, again, very exciting. That the word comes always, but it's so true. I mean, it's incredible.
Truly. I mean, we just had Dakar that finished.
Absolutely. I was thinking about it.
Yes, Dani Agil, it's been on the show a few times.
Absolutely.
What a great representation it is for the country.
Yeah,
we're not just, we get it, women drive in Saudi Arabia. It's old news, but now we have women competing in Dakar. And I remember she got second or third place in one of her segments.
Yeah.
Which was good to see.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of her when I mentioned
I had a feeling,
basically. Yeah. We know each other, and I think it's remarkable in many ways. And I could visit, by the way, the Dakar camp, and it's quite impressive, I must say.
I was speaking to some rally drivers 2 years ago, and I asked them, what do you think of Saudi Arabia for Dakar? They said, I think they were French. They said, fantastique. I said, tell me, what is it that is fantastique? They said 3 things. The first thing is we are secure here. We're safe. These 2 people raced when it was in Africa, and they raced when it was in South America. And they said there were safety concerns there. Like if you're sleeping, you'll wake up in the morning and maybe something is taken. So that was the first thing. So second thing is there is phone reception in the desert, which was good. And the third thing is, my God, the food options over here. You get all the international brands, where in Africa and South America, you wouldn't get, the mainstream international brands. So they said, we love it. And, a desert is a desert. Yes, the Saudi desert is challenging. But those 3 things, cell reception, good food, and security.
Well, major elements, especially for that kind of race. No, I must say it's really very impressive, even the organization. And by the way, what you mentioned is also what we could call Saudi hospitality.
Yeah.
It's a reality for anybody who comes here. And of course, when you hear about it from abroad, it helps.
Yeah, you felt it, I'm sure, from day one.
Absolutely.
From your perspective, what would you say the most striking thing is when it comes to the kingdom's social transformation? What have you seen that caught your eye the most?
Well, many things, but let me insist on 2 maybe. First, women, or their situation, the way things have changed, and the way Saudi women themselves talk about it. I think it's very striking. I know, when we all know that there are targets within Vision 2030 to promote women in the workforce, for instance, and we know that, in fact, already now the figures show that they are beyond target, about 37% or so women in the workforce, whereas the target was 30% by 2030. I think that's a huge thing, not just because, of course, now women contribute to the GDP of the country in very technical terms, but also with all that goes with it in terms of change in society. And so I think it will keep going. And of course, women's rights now have been changing very fast, and we are all very impressed by it. But then, and it comes with it in a way, the second point, which is more general, is the support of the society to these changes and the optimism of the population. And don't say that in a naive way. Probably not everybody is so happy, but clearly when you talk to people, they are really proud of what's happening. And so, and they believe in the future. They know that what's happening comes with risks in a way, because any change comes with risks, but they take it in a positive way. And to be honest, that's a major difference with Europe, where people are much less optimistic. And I think it's an incredible asset for Saudi Arabia. Probably it has to do also with the demography. Here, when you look at the figures, and that's one that's quite striking, 70-45. In Europe, you have 70% of the population above the age of 35. Here is the exact opposite. You have 70% of the population is under the age of 35. I think it contributes to this difference. And so, and in a good way for Saudi Arabia. And the youth are very committed to what's happening. And so I think these are major changes. Then we could talk about many other things, when you see people on the street, when you see people in the restaurants, very different from what I used to see when I came on missions years ago, as you mentioned. But this is already a kind of result of the other one. So the society is changing very fast, and people want it. And I think that's something which is a major asset, whatever the coming events. Because when you have a population that is so proud of it or wants it so much, even if difficulties may occur due to the regional situation or even internally, because you never know, you can have major economic changes, etc., you can face it. And I think it's very, very positive. And for foreigners living here, it's very pleasant because you see people who are positive, for the most part.
And with that comes quality of life. I would imagine living here as a diplomat 10, 15, 20 years ago would have been a lot more challenging than today.
Well, I'm not sure about it because I was not here. And I hear that for diplomats, it was not that difficult. Yes, of course, the constraints were there. But being diplomats, they were a bit more preserved from the most difficult part of it. But I don't know. Right now, clearly, this more open society is very, very pleasant for diplomats living here.
Going back to your point about how it's changing and the drive towards Vision 2030 and beyond, I think two key elements are integrated into what gave you that sensation. I think the first thing is alignment. There's alignment with everyone understanding that this is the mission, and there's so many different verticals and touch points of people contributing towards that mission. I find myself being one of them on a micro level. And I think the second one is we were hungry/ready for it. We saw countries around us pick up with maybe less resources. And Saudis were asking themselves, when is it going to be our turn? And that day, the when will it be our turn, is today a reality. Here's your opportunity. I always said that whatever you're good at, whatever skill God gave you, if you were to practice it in Saudi today, you will be backed by the top. I'm thinking sports, thinking talents. I have a cousin of mine who was one of the first rowers in Saudi Arabia. He rowed for Saudi in Tokyo in 2020. He's captain of the rowing team today, Hussein Ali Raza. A rower. Even Prince Abdulaziz said, I didn't know we had a rower. A lot of my lawyers and banking friends who were in Hong Kong, New York, Dubai, they're here now.
Yeah.
They came back home. So whatever it is you're good at, whether it's sports or as a professional, or as a podcaster, you get empowered by the top, and that's refreshing.
I heard it, by the way, from Saudis myself, including, for instance, young ladies going to the United States for university, and then coming back and saying that maybe years ago they wouldn't have come back that way.
No, exactly.
Now, probably they would have upon the request of their families or I don't know what, but now they come back because they want to be part of it. They know there are opportunities and they want to be part of it. I had that conversation with quite a number of people, and that's very refreshing in a way. Very, very positive. And from various venues, and I think it makes sense. It means something. And as I told you earlier, even now you have people from other countries looking at this country as an opportunity. And even sometimes preferring to stay here rather than going back to Europe because they consider that the position here is important, and telling me, so I won't give names because I don't, that, for them, they consider that this is a land of opportunities, which maybe they won't have in Europe. Although the quality of life is great in Europe, alhamdulillah, thank God. But these changes and this will for change and building a future, etc., is very strong here and appealing not just to Saudis, but also to people from other countries. So I think it's also a major asset.
Absolutely. I would imagine Saudis who were living abroad 4 or 5 years ago, they were probably told by their colleagues, what are you, crazy living here? I mean, your country's taking off right now. So not only are their colleagues interested in coming, but the Saudi citizens who are working abroad, like if your colleagues wanting to move to Saudi Arabia because that's where the opportunity is these days, then who are you to not want to explore that for yourself?
No. And I would add an element, by the way. It corresponds also to a wider evolution of the world. It has its own domestic logic, but I think we are now in times where the world is changing very fast.
Yeah.
In all fields. Everybody is now focusing on AI, but it's not just about AI. It's been about transportation, about culture, about everything. And I think that if countries and people are not able to adapt and adjust to these changes, well, there will be trouble. And I think that that's exactly now what's happening here. Adjusting domestically, creating a new economy and opening the society also corresponds to the ability to adjust to the new globalization.
Yeah.
Because globalization covers a lot of fields. And I think that's, for the country as a whole, it's a strategic choice. And I think it also corresponds to what people feel. Of course, not everybody is steeped into globalization on a daily basis, but according to the sector or according to what you want to do, you are always impacted. And the way things are evolving now, here, probably you have more assets to face it. And this is also the message that is brought by these young people we are talking about coming back here to be part of it. It's also because whether consciously or not, that's what they know, what's happening. And so it's also, and here again, it's important to have this dialogue between, for me, Europe and this country. I know that the kingdom has other partners as well, but this relationship between Europe and Saudi Arabia makes sense also in that frame, against that backdrop.
Would you say that the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the EU today is at the strongest it's ever been?
Well, it's difficult to tell, but clearly it's one of its best in many fields, and both between member states of the Union and the Kingdom, but also collectively. And again, I don't say that in a naive way or just for kind of diplomatic talk. When you look at what's happening, that's where we are. I mean, I mentioned earlier economic figures, but when you look also at what's happening, for instance, in the political dialogue, including following the summit I mentioned earlier between the GCC and the EU, or now the way we coordinate on top regional topics, even if we can be frustrated at times, etc. It's not because of the bilateral relation. Bilateral relation is excellent. It's the reality on the ground, which needs probably even more action, more coordination. But we see eye to eye on many topics, and it corresponds to the fact that we have shared interests, not identical but shared in many ways, and also to the fact that we talk a lot. That's also something that strikes me. It's my job, of course, but at the higher level, you have very regular exchanges at the top level, at the ministerial level, facilitating this understanding and collective action. And at a time when we need this collective action. And then there's also the cultural field. I think it's key because if you want people to understand people, it mustn't be just at the top. It must be also at all levels. And for instance, you were mentioning sports. Very interestingly, many sports references now here are directly connected to Europe. I was checking, for instance, some time ago, all football coaches were Europeans. Now, it's no longer 100%, it's a bit less, but the vast majority is European. The champions you mentioned, quite a number of them are Europeans, not exclusively, but I think it creates connections as well. And what strikes me as well is that when you talk, for instance, even to chefs in cooking, when you talk to local ones, I mean, because there's a number of them now, when you talk to writers, and this elite exists here at a high level. Most of them have been to Europe at some point and have European references, not just European references. I'm realistic, but still, you have this connection. And vice versa. Quite a number of people in Europe now have been here for different purposes, but keep this connection. So, to answer your question, yes, I think we are at one of the best moments. Then difficult to make other comparisons, but and I would add that it's needed. because we face common challenges once again, and big ones.
I'm just happy that a Schengen visa now, I get it for 5 years. There was a day where, I think 15 years ago, I had a 1 week's trip and I got a 10-day visa. And now it's 5 years and hoping to one day it being visa free for Saudis.
That's a big topic, a very sensitive one, very basic in a way, very sensitive. And I heard it before, so this is no surprise to me. Yeah, you mentioned this very positive step about now getting this five-year visa. And I can tell you that it was discussed at the summit again. And if you look at the final declaration of the summit, but of course, it's only for diplomats only, it is explicitly mentioned that both sides will keep working with a view to getting to the visa-free system.
Because
it will take time, by the way. Let's be honest. It won't be, you cannot do that in one day. You know, we have a new parliament at the European level. We have a new commission. So it's not just about just the European institutions. You have these new institutions that have to work on it, but you also, they need to make sure that all member states agree, etc. So that's why it takes time. But the goal is clear.
Fantastic. I'm sure the fact that Saudi opened up to the 27 Schengen states whereby they can come and get an e-visa online in a matter of minutes, that helped things. And I know a few of the GCC countries are visa free. And I know a lot of Saudis are there scratching their heads saying, when is it going to be our turn? But I mean, having 5 years now is a breath of fresh air, because many
Absolutely.
people were sick of getting 6 months, me included. Are there any specific interactions that you've had with Saudis that left you feeling, wow, okay, you know, this interaction was so pleasant, and you got a chance to know Saudis on an even deeper level? Anything stood out for you?
Well, in fact, many. As I told you, we are open to this contact, and so far I've had only pleasant surprises. Who knows? And I've been here only for a year and a half, so there's still plenty of time left. Well, we mentioned earlier these female champions, for instance. I must say that meeting them was a great experience. There are remarkable personalities, but also being able to see concretely what it means was very, very special. I met with artists as well, for instance. You don't expect to meet so much with artists when you come here. I knew, because as I told you, I'm supposed to be an Arabist and know a bit about the region. I knew there was, of course, writers and painters, etc. But meeting them now does make a difference as well. And for instance, I've started to meet. I haven't finished yet. You know, the president or chair people of these cultural commissions, based depending on the Ministry of Culture. Each encounter was a very interesting one.
Did you meet the culinary one?
Absolutely.
Mayada? She's a good friend, and she's been on the show.
I can say she's a good friend as well, by the way. And I thought of her as well, mentioning, these people who travel to Europe and were based there. It's incredible.
Amazing.
Well, even she as a personality, as a person, embodies this new Saudi Arabia, but also what they're doing at this culinary commission is remarkable, enhancing the local heritage, and also mixing the influences, being able to build something that was totally out of reach just a few years ago. So, I met even the literature commission. I mean, it's incredible with in movies as well, in cinema, in television. One of the things I did before coming, when I knew I was appointed, and it was both pleasant and very professional. I went to Netflix and I checked. I Googled. I use as a keyword Saudi. And then you have lots of movies and even TV series, and I watched most of them. And I think it's so revealing about the country, because many topics are broached in a pleasant or more dramatic way, according to what you're watching. But it's there. And then through it, you see the creativity of this new, young Saudi Arabia. And so you see, that's another example of things that are really pleasantly surprising.
Yeah.
And and then you could extend that to other topics. For instance, even when you meet with business people, in many fields, you discover things that, yes, you could expect in a way, but that are still very striking when you see them. When you look, for instance, at what Saudi Arabia is doing now in e-gaming, I'm now talking just about Saudis who play. There are many of them, by the way, a very high rate, including according to international standards, both boys and girls, by the way. I was told so, and I believe so. But even now, what's being done in terms of industry, e-gaming industry, this savvy business thing.
So the person that sat in the chair before you 3 hours ago was Brian Ward.
Absolutely. So we have the same friends, and it's impressive.
Impressive.
A few years ago, Saudi Arabia was not on the map. Now it's one of the most active players. To use the right word. And when you see what they do, to create these new games, etc., it's very telling about the potential and the will in this country. So, and I think that people who would overlook it from abroad would miss something because it's happening here and now. Yes, the world is big. There are other people doing nice things elsewhere, but it's also happening here. And I think that for Europeans as well, by the way, it's very interesting because you can touch the changes now. You see, you can feel how fast it can go and how this potential is being used right now. So it's very exciting once again.
Truly, especially with our cuisine. It's a rich cuisine. Everyone knows the French, everyone knows the Indian, everyone knows the Italian. The Saudi, God bless MOC and them thinking that we need a culinary arts commission, because Mayada and her team are in events in Paris and London, and they're introducing the French and the British people to kaleja and all these Arabic Saudi dishes, let's say, that is typically the first point of contact with a culture. You try the food. I've had Indian food before I went to India. I've had Italian food before I went to Italy. Yeah. So it's a great first touch point.
No, and taking food as an element of culture is a major step. It seems obvious to us like that, but when you think about it, it took time all over the world to be part of this cultural heritage or whatever you want to call it. And so I think that Saudi Arabia is doing great in that as well. In a way, which is good, is that Saudi Arabia now has been able to take advantage of what others did over a longer time before, learning from the experience of others. And so then it's happening very fast and in a very positive way. I think it's good for the country. Yeah.
Truly. What key collaborations do you see between the EU and Saudi Arabia? I'm just looking at my notes. Anything on the education front, anything on the sustainability front?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, education... To me, education is a key element in the relations between countries and between people. Well, I mentioned earlier this people-to-people phrase, which is used for that. It covers a lot of things, but in particular, education, because if people get closer through education, then you win for the rest of their lives. And so in two ways, because clearly there's a need for building more competencies. And I know that it's a priority for the kingdom. And so there are fields where Europe can help on that. Of course, we can learn from each other. It's two ways, but still, there are fields where our Saudi friends want to go to Europe to learn on some things, not just about cooking or cuisine, vice versa. And so, for instance, we're promoting now what we call the Erasmus Plus program. Erasmus Plus means, maybe you heard of it. It was created years ago just among European states first to facilitate exchanges of students, having your students from Germany going to Italy, for instance, and vice versa. And it was so successful that we extended it around the world. And now, since I think for 2 years, I think Saudi Arabia is part of this program. So it facilitates the exchanges of students. And again, European students coming to Saudi Arabia, where now you have top-ranking universities, and I'm not talking just about cost, but also, of course, Saudi students going to Europe. Till now, many of them went more to the States, for instance, to Britain, which is a European country, but not European Union. And right now, you have quite a number going to European countries of the European Union, but we could do more on that. And so that's one of the elements, for instance. But it's not just that, I think that building competencies and also facilitating cultural exchanges. Yeah. Because when you've been in contact with the culture, and you speak the language, for instance, we were talking about that a bit earlier, it makes a huge difference, because then you enter much more easily in these exchanges that make you understand what your interlocutor is doing, and then you tend to do more things with these interlocutors. So we also push for that. We promote languages for diversity, but also for more understanding. And that's why, in a much more modest but still very strong symbolic way, we organize every year, and some twice a year, what we call European Nights of Languages here in Riyadh. And it works very well. It's a very basic principle. We have all member states coming and allowing visitors, Saudi friends, to learn, just have a kind of a flash lesson in one language. So, of course, people think of Spanish or French, but then you can hear Czech, you can talk Greek, etc. That's a message as well. And it's very successful. Obviously, we have lots of Saudi visitors and asking for more. So that's just a few examples, but clearly we have to keep pushing into that direction. Yeah.
When it comes to cultural dialogue, economic partnerships, are you happy with where we are, or do you feel like we could strengthen those two areas?
I think the job of an ambassador is to be always happy, but always trying to do more. Because you have to be positive about what's happening. Well, when we are among friends, of course, and Saudi Arabia and the European Union are friendly countries. And so what's happening is already a lot. And I think we have to promote it, because sometimes people do not know that things are happening. So we must promote what is existing, but we have to go further.
Mm.
And this applies basically to all fields. And all the more so, as I said, this context of permanent changes and very, very strong ones make it even more necessary. So that's what we're doing in the field of education, as I said, now trying to promote more cooperations among universities, for instance. And but I think it applies as well to the economic field, because the economy, is just like a bicycle that's rolling. So if you stop, you fall in a way. So we must keep pushing together, adjusting to the technological changes, adjusting to new markets, adjusting to the new constraints for sustainable development that you mentioned earlier. In all these fields, nobody has the solution on his or her own. We always have to give answers together. In a way, that was one of the huge lessons of COVID. When COVID happened, it was totally impossible for one country to bring a solution on its own. It was a world pandemic, so we had to be serious all together. It was not that obvious, and it worked. And in a way, I think it's true as well now for all the other changes, and it applies again to more or less every field.
When it comes to jobs for Saudis, does the embassy, the EU embassy, do you look for hiring Saudis? Is that something that Saudis can contribute towards?
It's a possibility, of course. It's as you know, we have, as diplomats, we are expatriates by definition. So part of the team cannot be but, as far as we're concerned, from European countries. But yes, we have local staff as well. So it can be open to Saudis, of course. Yes, of course.
We'll close with this. Your message to the European audience. What is your message to them about Saudi Arabia? And then I'll ask you about your message to Saudis about the European Union. So what would you tell Europeans about Saudi Arabia?
Well, I would say try it.
Try.
Seeing is believing, as we say here. So I think be on the move and engage your interlocutors. We have to do things together. Saudi Arabia is a chance. Is in a time of changes, having a partner like Saudi Arabia can make a difference. Does make a difference already, but can make even more of a difference. And we are much closer than some might think. And in a way, I would say the same exactly to the Saudis, because it goes both ways. But I think that in a way, Saudis know Europe.
They love Europe.
and love it already. Whereas in Europe, the ones who know Saudi Arabia love it, but there are too many people who still do not know it. But I mean, the reckoning is the same. I think we would both take advantage of doing more together. And again, I really mean what I said. We are in terms of very deep changes that can come with risks, and not always very positively, to be honest. The risk of misunderstandings between people, the tensions, the geopolitical tensions, the economic risks as well are huge. And we can't make them positive, but for that, we must act. And again, there's no one can solve it or take advantage on alone. And so that's why the message will be the same to the two. And the more I'm in this country, the more I think it's an opportunity. You know, in Europe now, we have a lot of question marks about our competitiveness, about what we really want to do, if we are up to the challenges, if we can stay a major power. And I think my answer is yes, we have all the potential, but we must act swiftly. And in all fields, by the way, for innovation, for security, for anything. But then to do that, we have to do more together. And I think a country like Saudi Arabia is big enough and changing fast enough and is close enough to be one of these key partners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My advice to Saudis would be explore more than just London and Paris when it comes to Europe. There's some beautiful areas in Scandinavia, Holland,
Absolutely,
Germany, Eastern Europe, Lithuania, Finland. You know, and I need to take the advice as well that there's more to Europe than just that.
Well, on that precisely, being the ambassador of the European Union, I say yes. You have 27 countries. Try them all, and of course, even within these countries, there's a lot of differences between northern France, southern France. Same, you mentioned these countries, but I think it's we're on the right way. It's going. I'm struck by the quite deep knowledge that Saudi people have of European countries. Well, of course, being French, I think about France, but not just that. When you talk with them about Italy, then you realize that people haven't been just to Milano or Rome. They've been to Napoli. They know some little places in, of course, areas that you don't know, and they go to places for vacation which are on some beaches that are not so well known, not so obvious, not just the French Riviera, for instance. Same for the Alps when you talk about the mountains, etc. So, yeah, it's quite. They have been quite far already.
I'm going to the Alps in 3 days with my family. And I'm very, very, there's really no holiday like a ski holiday. Very, very excited. What would be one of your favorite parts in Europe? Is there a specific area, a city or a town that you favor that you can recommend to us?
Well, I cannot but recommend my own region in the south of France between what we call the Languedoc, Occitanie. So which, well speaking, from Toulouse to Aix-en-Provence, and which has a mix of course, seaside, but also
Provence, I
good
hear,
food.
is beautiful, Provence.
Absolutely. So that's great. But honestly, the more you travel, the more you discover that areas are great. For instance, people don't often think of the northern France, Belgium, Netherlands, whereas when you go there, it's amazing, you know. Of course, you have more gray skies, more rain than in Spain or Italy, but from architectural point of view, art point of view, quality of life, again, it's amazing. I remember having quite close Italian friends, and I was surprised that, in fact, each time they had vacation, they went to Lille and Brussels. By definition, you would rather think that people from Lille and Brussels go to Italy, and that was the opposite. But then you could say so about, you mentioned Scandinavian countries. Now they have quite a high number of tourists as well. So every region could be interesting. And I was recently in Portugal, for instance. And again, there's a huge diversity in Portugal that people don't even think of at times. So please visit Europe.
Absolutely.
No, it's great.
Yeah. Saudi Arabia can learn a lot from Western Europe, EU states, about how you don't need a car or a plane to get from point A to B. the train network works phenomenally.
Absolutely.
We do have some trains in Saudi, but I'm hoping that over the next 5-10 years, as we gear up to the World Cup, all the major cities would be connected. There's a great Spanish company that did the Haramain Railway, which goes Mecca, my city, Jeddah, to Medina. I think linking Saudi by train can do a lot more for domestic tourism and for tourists when they come from abroad.
Mm-hmm.
The way Europe got it so right.
No, absolutely. But these are major projects, and long-term projects which play a key role not just for transportation as such, but also much more widely, because they create dynamics for the regions they go through or where they make connection, and for the people, it's part of a much wider evolution than just techniques. But on that, maybe I can just mention the fact that there's one thing that already impresses me a lot is the Riyadh metro. By coincidence, I visited it just a few days ago, including here quite close by to the Kaft metro station, which is amazing. This Zaha Hadid architecture, Calder artwork in the middle, right next to the escalator. It's really impressive, and I must say that it's a very good example precisely of what the new Saudi Arabia brings, because it's something that was unimaginable a few years ago only, and it took years. It did take years, and it implied European companies, by the way, not just them, but quite a number of European companies. And I must say that the result is really, really impressive, and with this kind of unifying dimension it has as well, which train lines has as well. So I think it bodes well for the future.
Truly. I can't even imagine how difficult it would be to build a metro system above and underground in a fully matured city.
No, absolutely. And that was missing in Riyadh. You did it collectively. It's very impressive. So I wish the country all the best for all the other projects of the same kind. And again, if it can be in a partnership with the Europeans, even better. But again, I say it without being naive. It's normal that you have other partners as well, and it's a great game in a way, but it's good for the kingdom.
Truly. I know the country has strong partnerships with many countries around the world, but the Saudi-French one is a special one.
I cannot contradict you on that. Although currently I'm, again, not just, I remain French, but not just French. Yes, there's a long story. It's a long and very rich story between the two countries, but and in many ways. But when you look at other country stories as well, yes, it's not always the same, but I was struck as well being here and now having a look at the relationships between 27 countries in the kingdom, of the diversity of the relationships, because it's not because now, of course, I hear of the Italians, Spaniards, the Greeks as well. For instance, there was recently a visit by the Greek Prime Minister, but in fact, you have much deeper relation between the two countries. Even countries like Cyprus, which is not so big on the map, but clearly there's a very good connection to the kingdom and the region. And I could take many other examples, including Eastern Europe. We don't always talk about Eastern Europe, but recently there was a new airline opening between Poland and Saudi Arabia, based on facts, because there is a need for it, etc., etc. So it's quite significant, and we definitely have to build on it, because I think Saudi friends told me, they say, look, we know you better than we know the Chinese and other countries. So we want to do more with you. But of course, you have to work for that on both sides, by the way. And I think it's a very good element of this relation. And let's do it again.
Good to know that we're in a good place, from strength to strength. Speak on behalf of Saudis. I mean, thank you so much for the work you do.
No,
again, 27 countries in your portfolio or representatives is no easy task. And thank you for being the middle guy between those 27 nations and Saudi Arabia.
Well, again, in a modest way, but thank you very much. And thanks for the invitation. I think this kind of dialogue is just a small, modest part of all that's happening and what we have described.
Absolutely.
Thanks again. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup to you too.
Shukran jazilan.
MashaAllah. I mean, I need to practice more French and to be as good as your Arabic one day.
No, thank you again.
Thanks for your time, sir.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. Shukran.